Well, it's vintage Duterte. I mean, if you heard the first SONA, this particular State of the Nation address is no different in terms of style, in terms of delivery, in terms of the use of the language. But then there are substantial differences, I think, in the priority topics. Uh, of course, the anti-drug campaign, that's an expected topic. You have the peace talks with all the rebels. Within that, of course, the Marawi incident, the declaration of martial law, and so on. That's expected. The independent foreign policy, that's expected. The economic program, definitely is expected. But the more interesting thing are how he handled the topics and also how he introduced nuances and details into his speech. For one, I was surprised actually by the environment and mining as a major topic. He discussed it for so long, very specific. He addressed some remarks directly on the miners and so on. He mentioned names like former Secretary Gina Lopez, and he, for somebody who was reluctant to sign the Paris Agreement on climate change, he was forceful in his advocacy for clean environment, responsible mining, and such. There's also a development of a what I consider a economic strategy of development. He expounded on the need for developing local industries. Even with regards to mining, for example, he has this very specific policy. He said that he would develop the capacity of the Philippines to process mineral ores rather than exporting them directly as raw materials. He said something about the relations between the infrastructure building, build, tax reform, and this particular direction of developing local industries. I would describe it as industrialization strategy. And that's in a way, it's a big surprise because he was not known for economic thinking or economic planning. In fact, he made that clear in his first State of the Nation address that he would rather leave economy to the economic managers. And he will continue the policies of the old administration. So it's a surprise that what he is actually describing in his State of the Nation address is a big economic strategy. Basically, if you logically follow the discussion, one can even say that he's actually trying to develop the Philippines along the footsteps of his neighboring advanced countries like Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, or even China. And for the Philippines or the Philippine government to adopt that is, I mean, we're used to being a consumer economy. And what he's trying to say is that we will be developing the industries necessary. It was in the ad-lib. That's why, as I said, the vintage Duterte speech is partly written speech and partly ad-libs. And the ad-libs can be an entire new topic. It can be addition to or explanation to the written one, but it certainly reflects his own thinking. I think as a direction, yes. I mean, as articulated, because he was not known to articulate that kind of an approach before. Of course, there is that possibility that he still is, remembers his activist background before, or nationalism, nationalist economy, and so on. But he was, I mean, he never made a speech that basically described that kind of an approach. Actually, looking back, yes, he already made some decisions before. Remember the appointment of presidential advisor on the steel industry, R.J. Jacinto. That was, I think, already an indication where he's thinking of bringing the economy and directing the direction. Because if you link this fact to what he's saying today, it can only be one thing, that's industrialization. So this is a big shift from services to manufacturing, agriculture, and so on, but on a modernized setting. And I think China will be very glad to help in that direction, because that would mean winning away the Philippines from the market framework of the Western economies.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a big change.
Big.
I mean, if he really is able to do that,
Yes.
then you can see a different Philippines taking its own path to development. Well, the other is in the foreign policy. He, for the first time also, although I have a suspicion that he was already talking about it in his previous speeches, it's just not detailed as what he said yesterday. I'm talking of one, the principles involved in relation to his own definition of independent foreign policy. He named three in this speech: mutual benefit, mutual respect, and non-interference in each other's domestic affairs. I think there was a message there, because the Balanghiga bells suddenly came in, and some of his cabinet are saying informally and in their social media blogs that it's meant to deliver an answer to the U.S. Congress hearing on Philippine human rights.
Human rights.
I think there may be truth in that. He was, everybody was surprised that suddenly, out of the blue, you have this part of the speech. And considering that he has this close relations with President Trump, I think he's making a distinction already between Trump and the establishment, the U.S. establishment that he thinks is doing this campaign against him. So that's one. The second is that in the foreign policy, he stressed the Chinese linkages. Actually, the surprise is he did not elaborate anymore on South China Sea. He mentioned that, yes, but there's nothing new there, except to say that negotiation is going on. It started already, and he's not about to change his views on China or the South China Sea. Yes, and he said yes. Precisely, the talks or the agenda setting in the negotiation has already reached that stage where they define mutual areas of cooperation, where they can easily have agreements. That actually includes exchanging drug or detainees or prisoners. That is on the table already. So you have a more elaborate handling of foreign policy here that bears monitoring in the coming days, because there are major events like the ASEAN meetings where these principles, I think, will be the basis for the President's handling of the chairmanship of ASEAN, and particularly with regards to issues of cooperation on violent extremism, North Korea, etc., etc. That's I think the direction that is along the lines of the non-aligned movement. And I have a intimations that may be the one that he will try to convince ASEAN to take, meaning a stronger regional alliance but not founded on alignment, but as a independent regional grouping dealing both with all the powers, the two major powers and the other powers. That's an interesting development actually, because ASEAN always has this controversy on relationship of member countries with the two major powers, and many issues basically where the ASEAN positions were not really strong or unified, precisely because of this relationship. And President Duterte, if he pursues the line of independent foreign policy and apply it to ASEAN, would mean an alignment. So that's a prospect that we have to see. Well, I'm not really concluding there that the talks have ended. In fact, the more revealing position, I think, is not in the speech, but in his going out and talking before the rally of the left, when he said that the context here is that when the rallies saw him, they were shouting slogans of ibalik ang negotiation, to that effect. And he answered by saying that, you want negotiations? Why did you ambush me? You want to talk to me, but you're trying to kill me. Who would you talk to if I'm dead? And then the significant part is the one after. He said, okay, you want talks, let's talk. That already speaks volumes about his actual framing of what he said earlier, that he stopped all these talks. It's more of frustrations, I think, that the martial law declaration was used as a pretext to intensify offensives. From his point of view, I think he saw this as an opportunistic decision by the CPP in PA, because the context, of course, is the Marawi crisis, and the position or the call of the government panel or the president himself was to have a ceasefire, and they can cooperate on fighting the Maoti group. And if you remember, Jose Maria Sison himself said, yes, they claim they have forces around Marawi and they can help out. But they put conditions on this, the release of more political prisoners. And basically, I think that the frustration of the president is that you're offering that, but what you're doing actually by announcing a general offensive, you're trying to make hay while the sun shines. While the military is preoccupied with Marawi. And in fact, I think sometimes before, the president was saying that as soon as my soldiers left Iloilo for Marawi, you attack a town. That's Maasin. So the context here is, I think, one of frustration, one of still open to talks, but saying that the ball is not on my side actually, it's on yours. You want to talk, we can talk. If you don't want to talk, I don't want to talk either.